Hello, I'm Fiona Allan. I'm Artistic Director and Chief Executive at Birmingham Hippodrome, and we're really excited over the next few months to be hosting some very different versions of Romeo and Juliet, and joined today by dancers from Rosie Kay's production of Romeo and Juliet and from Birmingham Royal Ballet. And I thought perhaps we could start with some introductions, maybe from this end. Just names and roles.
My name is Subhash Raman and I play Romeo in Rosie Kay's Romeo and Juliet.
My name is Maiwa Oginaika and I play Juliet.
My name is Yao Qian and I play Juliet in Radio and Romeo and Juliet.
My name's Tyrone Singleton and I play Romeos in Kenneth Macmillan's Romeo and Juliet and also the Romeo character in Edward Kluge's Radio and Juliet.
So we've got 3 Romeos and 3 Juliets that we can talk about. So that's a lot of different, approaches to dance, and I'm just interested to hear from you all about, how you approach those roles. And maybe Maya will tell us a bit about, what skills you need to have to bring to your Juliet.
A lot of characterization is involved in it because obviously it's a story, it's a well-known play. Our version is quite contemporary, and I come from a contemporary background, so I use those skills definitely. And also a lot of skills from the other dancers. We've got a mixture of styles, so I guess it's the skill of being able to work with other dancers and pick up things from them, as well as the choreographer.
Would you say that's the same with your 2 Juliets?
Kenneth Macmillan is like the classical version, and we need to have a great technique, but also there's a lot of storytelling, which you got to tell Juliet's story. It's heartbreaking, but it's in the end it's heartbreaking, but it's a very nice role to play. And for Radio Juliet, and it's very neoclassical, but also it's just a very cool piece.
Is it? Right. But you both have backgrounds as classical dancers, don't you? Ty, your training would be similar? Tell us a bit about the way you were trained.
I was trained at the Royal Ballet School and Arts Educational School, and you very much just working on your technique and honing each step so that you perfect them perfectly. Then you learn a ballet like Kenneth Macmillan's Romeo and Juliet, and you kind of have to let go of all of that technique. And it sounds kind of a contradiction, but it's not in a way. You kind of have to have your technique so secure that you can be absolutely free on top. The acting is far more important than the execution of the steps in this ballet, for sure.
And at what point do you learn to act as dancers?
From day one. It would be great if you did. I think I was surprised when I joined a professional company where I wasn't aware of how much acting I would have to do, really. And then it turns out that that's the one thing that I enjoy most.
Is it the same having worked with Rosie Kay, and how did you approach building the character of your Romeo?
The great thing with Rosie Kay was that we were kind of given the freedom to be able to express almost and bring our characters to life. And I've grown up reading Romeo and Juliet. I've seen so many renditions of it, and what was great about this was the social and political aspect about knife crime and gang culture and all the issues going on around the world, really. And I was able to then home in and bring my personal experiences into the character. So the choreography and the character kind of develop side by side, as opposed to let's learn the step and then create the character. And as we've kind of chiseled this character, it's kind of been change a bit of the choreography, change a bit of the character, and it's kind of, this is the way we've kind of worked it to really bring that realism to everyone you see on stage.
Yeah, I'd say that the way we've worked with Rosie Kay's version of Romeo and Juliet, it really has been collaborative, and a lot of the movement comes from us as dancers, and we did spend a lot of time in the R&D phase workshopping our characters and about their identities, where they come from, how they feel, what their aspirations are, their fears, their hopes and desires, dreams and all of that stuff. And the movement does come from us, and Rosie's been more of a choreographer and director role and shaping the piece so it all works quite harmoniously.
It was interesting you said that you were working at them in parallels almost, and you said that you worked and strengthened the characteristics of your characters. Was that sort of before you learned or created the movement?
It kind of felt like at the same time, but I feel like even some of the stuff we did in our audition is in the show, because she's given us like, I want you to make something based on, you know, this idea or this theme, and yeah, so we were always working on what the character is, as well as the actual movement and choreography and duets, trios and things. Yeah, it did feel like quite together, and I think that's kind of strengthened the movement. It's a bit more, it's deeper now that we're working on it more.
Is that also because you've been creating something that's brand new, and so as the first people in those roles, you are creating not just the choreography, the characterization with it.
And it's interesting to try and distinguish like what's us and what's the character as well, which in some ways has been tricky, being like, oh, this isn't my, or my would do this, but actually what would Juliet do?
Oh, that's really, really interesting, because you're working with existing choreography and having to bring your own characterization over the top of it.
Yeah, I think the difference is there's never been a Romeo in Rosie Kay's version of Romeo and Juliet, or a Juliet in that version, whereas there have been hundreds of Juliets and Romeos in Kenneth Macmillan's version, but I definitely try to make it mine, and I'm sure you do. I can feel you do as well by you know, bringing your own individual elements, I think.
Does that come with responsibility? Do you feel a responsibility to be Macmillan's Romeo or to be Ty's Romeo, or is it both?
That's the balance, isn't it? It's you have to honour the choreography and the style of the piece, but I think you have to bring your own identity to it. Otherwise you're just replicating, and I think that's not creative, that's not art.
How did you approach it? Did you watch and, yeah, like you said, not just replicating, but were you thinking about the character beforehand? Or?
Yeah, it's hard not to with a story like Romeo and Juliet. It's one of the greatest love stories, one of the greatest tragedies as well. So you already kind of have an expectation or an assumption of how it should be or how you think it should be, but then when you are inside it, sometimes it feels slightly different, you know, and it's not wrong, it's just, you know, I wouldn't do this, even though Leonardo DiCaprio did that in Baz Luhrmann's version. I felt I needed to do this for my Romeo, you know. I could never play the same Romeo that you do, just by our statures and our backgrounds, you know.
And I think that's what's great about these characters, is they can be put into any scenario or situation, and each time you'll get a different Romeo or a Juliet, which is great.
Have you ever performed or learnt these roles before in a different time, or a different role in Romeo and Juliet?
I've done many roles in Romeo and Juliet. The question I was going to ask Yao Chan is, this isn't the first, this is like the fourth time you've done Juliet?
Yeah.
But each time I've seen you do it, I've seen a growth in your characterization and a richer Juliet. So you flesh out the character. Have you found the first time you approached it is completely different to now?
Completely different. When I was watching the video from a couple of years, 2017, and then, but obviously it happens with your life experience, I'd say. I've grown, I've changed since, you know, when I was young. But I do still remember the feeling of the first time performing Juliet. I think I was like 21 or 22. And it was like, I had a last minute partnering changing. I did a show within an hour, like to rehearsing with a new partner. Also, it was his first time, which I always remember because I really get the feeling of you meet someone and you fall in love, because, you know, it just happened naturally. And I think I still carry some of that. Obviously, it hasn't been the same each time when I do performing, especially, because I like to leave a bit of gap to it. I don't like to set every time I have to do the same thing. Even in shows during the same period, I like to place a bit differently. It depends on who my mother or who my parents were on that day, you know, which is keep it fresh and keep it more exciting.
So you're not just working sometimes with different partners, but at the moment you're both learning or rehearsing 2 Romeos and 2 Juliets. How do you separate them?
I'd say it's quite easy, surprisingly easy, because they're so different.
It's so different.
Tell us about how different they are, because I don't know very much about Romeo and Juliet at all.
It's called Romeo and Juliet. It's by Edward Klug. He set it to Radiohead music. It's got a strong base and foundation in near-classical work. So it's not quite contemporary, what you guys do. It's still based on the classical side, but it's completely different to the Romeo and Juliet that we do as in the Birmingham Royal Ballet.
Yeah.
Definitely, isn't it? It is different, right?
Yeah, it's so different.
It couldn't feel more different. Like, honestly, yeah.
It's like they're just two different people.
So that is refreshing. It does keep it refreshing, yeah. And like, there's less of a story to tell in terms of reaction. It's almost like the atmosphere and emotion that we create when we dance together. That as an audience viewer, that's that you feel and create your own story in a way. Whereas Romeo and Juliet with the mimes and stuff, it's quite clear the gestures, what they're telling, you know.
I guess that's, you know, you're creating very different contexts in both those different pieces. And to come back to you, the context that you're setting, Rosie's Romeo and Juliet in. Tell us more about that and what it brings to your characters.
Yeah, this context is set in Birmingham, like modern day Birmingham. It's very, you could tell with the score and what we wear and the costume and the set that is very modern.
It's this summer, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. We're all young people, and it is based off Rosie's experience living in Birmingham as well as things that she's researched, like we mentioned, that with gang violence and like just a lot of social issues amongst young people in Birmingham.
She spent a good year and a half, maybe 2 years, doing a lot of research in Birmingham. She spent some time with gang members, ex-gang members, with the police force as well, spoken to a lot of families who have been involved. So there's a lot of research and depth gone in well before we even stepped into the studio. So we had a lot of material almost to digest, and then bring that into the character as well. So yeah, it is. Yeah, it's tough when you have to watch or hear certain things, but that's the reality you have to bring to the character.
But I think it is also quite relatable, and I think especially for young people, it could be quite an educational piece to watch. So
and it's very contemporary.
Yeah,
I mean, it couldn't be more contemporary than set in this summer, which is, incredibly different to Macmillan. And you were mentioning the use of mime, and maybe tell us more about that and how that works.
You probably have slightly more mime than me, isn't it? When you have to do things like the potion scene and
potion scene. It's so especially in Act 3, when after Romeo decides to leave, and she have to agree to marry to Paris, even though that's really not what she wanted. It's hard because you have to make it for me, I think, make it as natural as possible, as real. The bits with the potion, that how Marion, they always have to swallow the potion after you drink it, which it makes sense because you can't just like, that's it's not going through into your body. And then the bits like afterwards, like how everything aches, like you feel cold and this kind of thing. You have to obviously have to be very clear to deliver to the audience. They have to feel how you actually feel, but and bringing like almost like an atmosphere to them, so they will feel you when you're actually going through pain. And
there's certain, I think mime is this sort of separate art within classical ballet that in really, really classical ballets like Sleeping Beauty and even Swan Lake, the mime is very set, it's very clear, it's almost separate to the actual dancing steps, whereas in this slightly modern classical ballet that Kenneth Macmillan has made, they're more blended. So in the balcony scene between Romeo and Juliet, one of the lines from Shakespeare is, I swear by the sun. And I have to do this port de bras, but it is a mime, like that's my heart. It's to you, I leave it on the sun because it's burnt there, it means something. And it has to be real, it can't just be a port de bras, it can't just be a movement of the arm without feeling, without...
It's human, isn't
exactly,
it
has to be human, otherwise it's not believable, really.
With one version of your Romeo and Juliet being so classical and grounded, and then the other completely being slightly different, do you feel a sense of freedom to be able to go wilder with the other form than the pure grounded classical stuff, or in terms of your character and movement?
You'd think so. And I mean this in a great way, because Kenneth Macmillan's Romeo and Juliet is so free. You can be free on the top and your expressions and stuff. And with Romeo and Juliet, it's such a different, not vocabulary, but language for us, really. That it's just learning that language and finding the emphasis in that style of dancing, should we say, I think.
Do you feel that because you're doing both completely different shows, that they are informing each other as well? Like perhaps like by doing Romeo and Juliet, it is actually transforming the other version?
For me, it's separate. I felt like, because it just felt like different time. For Macmillan's, it's the time of, what was it, 60s centuries. But with radio, it's much more nowadays. Like I could put how I actually feel about it. So yeah, it's really different. Yeah.
But I guess there is an element of them complementing each other in some way, and especially that we're dancing together as well, so that you know, it's not that we're falling in love or anything, but like I'm used to how Yao Chan will move or how she will react and things like that tend to help. I guess you guys have that. You didn't dance together before.
No.
Together for this piece.
Yeah. No, and we do come from quite different backgrounds as well.
Completely.
So it's really interesting that we've said like how we were so surprised at how it actually just work and gel together. I think we work quite well together, and it feels really organic. Even though our backgrounds are quite different.
Was it like that on day one?
I don't know, it was quite a mishmash on day one. I think there was a lot going on.
Yeah, there was a lot going on,
Didn't really know what was going on.
Yeah, because we started just us two in the studio for a few days.
Yeah, we spent 4 days or something in the studio in the first, just to kind of experiment and see, because I come from a classical background. So they wanted to bring a different character to everyone else, and what attracts Juliet to this person that makes him different. And it was the South Asian style, so we kind of wanted to bring that into his character and then marry that with the style that Mayowa does, and somehow found a language which worked.
Yeah, I feel like I've learned a lot from you dancing together, definitely. And there's things that we now do together that are quite complementary and stuff. I move in a way that I don't think I would have if we weren't dancing together. Which has been great.
The piece is finished now, right?
Yeah, we're just kind of like fine-tuning and cleaning up and questioning a lot of parts and tweaks and
adding
now
in props and things.
We haven't even got to things like costume and props and stuff yet. Set,
tomorrow
and that's another big layer which we need to add on.
I was just thinking that before when you were talking about mime, and I thought, but you mime all the time, and then I realised that actually you don't have props yet.
Yeah, no. We're just pretending it's there.
But there's actually quite a bit of mime, I think, and there's a lot of like references and gestures that are quite clear what you mean, you know, hearts and things.
I think generally with dance, when you're expressing, even if it's through movement, it becomes a form of mime, right? So when we're not wanting to say something and we're not able to talk, you are in a sense miming and you're using your body to do it. And it just depends on how choreographically it comes across. So it's storytelling through movement, really.
Romeo and Juliet is quite interesting. Like, so going back to Kenneth Macmillan's, it's quite obvious that we are falling in love, or that this is happening because of the steps and the story. But with Romeo and Juliet, I find it's like, if you imagine that the classical ballet version, it follows the script. I find that the Romeo and Juliet version is almost the in-between bits. So in between the words, there's that space of, or emotion in between them, or like that's the dynamics of how we do something quite abstract. That's how I find it anyway,
Because yours follows the script, but it sort of condenses some characters and changes. It's not a pure Shakespearean.
No.
Like we don't have a friar, and like there's some characters that were quite minor in the play that are a lot more fleshed out in this version, and some that aren't there until.
So even though it's finished, the piece now, and even though we know all of the steps, there's quite a long way to go and
Yeah.
for the piece to grow until you hit the opening night and the performance.
Yeah.
That's quite
We
exciting.
like getting
Yeah.
different people coming in every day, seeing it, and everyone's like, well, why don't we try this? And we're like, okay, let's change it up again. Well, let's try this, let's change it up again. It's constantly
Once you
evolving.
change one thing, it has a
Yeah.
knock-on effect, yeah.
Thank you, guys. It's been absolutely amazing speaking to you about the very different approaches to Romeo and Juliet and Romeo and Juliet. And look, I can't wait to see the double bill of Rosie Kay's Romeo and Juliet and Radio and Juliet on the Hippodrome stage, which will be premiering together on the 14th of October, running through to the 16th of October. And tickets available via birminghamhippodrome.com.